All right, it is V12 engine time again. We're going to look at the bottom end of the engine. Just want to show everybody how it comes together. It's not built, just kind of put together, and we're going to just show you how things are oriented. Some people know this stuff easily, and some people are new, and it's always fun to just see how things go together. Here we go. Okay, JB, we left off on the last episode on this parts counter. Let's follow up. By the way, what is that behind the parts table there?
Oh my goodness. Well, yes. Well, that's the world's smallest Ferrari Testarossa. And it was done by a very famous designer and car builder named Jocko Johnson. This car was probably done somewhere around the 70s. It was obviously influenced by the Ferrari Testarossa, which is one of the most valuable cars in the world. I got this at a swap meet at Pomona in California, where one of his neighbors apparently caught his widow trying to throw this away.
Oh, wow.
And he immediately realized that it was a precious piece of art, and saved it, and I bought it from him. And since we are both well-known fiberglass people, I thought I would finish it in his honor, and that's what we're doing. As we get time, we're finalizing it, but it's a beautiful thing, and we've found some wire wheels that are right scale for it, and we're going to be putting a Ferrari starter motor in it, so we can say it has a Ferrari. Get it?
Yeah, I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
And these are done back in the 50s as promotional cars at the dealers. They would make a smaller version of the car you were buying, and then they sell it to a company called Power Car, made a number. Then there are other manufacturers, but it was a Thunderbird, or it was a Cadillac, whatever. They would make a miniaturized version for the little people to drive, and they would sell them at the dealerships, actually.
Right on. Okay.
So that's Jocko's work.
We'll have to revisit that later, I
yes.
think.
Yes,
for
but
sure.
Meanwhile, back at the engine.
Yeah, all these parts are primarily from the top end of the motor.
That's correct.
And I think it would be good for us to kind of look at the bottom end.
Yes.
And kind of complete the picture for people.
Exactly. And we've taken a number of those parts, and we brought it over here and just did a mock-up of the bottom of the motor, such that people can see what's going on here.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not a motor either. It's an engine.
It's an engine.
So let's be clear on that. Let's get that straight. If you want to impress your friends, call it an engine. Now this block, as we may have said earlier, has already been prepared, but it sat around, got surface rust on it. So it's going to have to go back through the cleaning process, but you see the plugs that have been replaced. These are all new.
Yep. And
so we have just roughly mocked it up in the position that these parts relative to the engine will wind up in.
Okay, so now
so you can kind of see their relationship one to the other.
A lot of people will know this, some people won't. This is called the crankshaft.
That's correct.
And this crankshaft is what is pushed into rotation by the pistons when they fire off.
That's correct. This is where the rods are bolted, and then that rod makes a connection to the piston.
Okay. Now, one thing I noticed, there's some holes drilled in here. What is that about?
Well, in order to balance these things, you got to remember these are spinning at incredibly high speed, and this crank is very, very long. So if you think about it, it's actually kind of dangerous. If this thing was to fly apart, it would cause a lot of damage. So there's a lot of effort made to make the cranks balanced so that they spin evenly. You don't want weight on one side of the crank and not on the other. Right. And as the rough castings are made, they machine the journals, which are these smoother spots, to accept the rods. But they also have to be mindful of the fact that the cranks, as cast, aren't necessarily balanced. So you see these holes that are drilled in the actual crank to get weight out of it. To balance the entire rotating assembly. That's how they did it. They drilled holes in these weights. You can see two of them here, so there was probably more weight over here than was here. so that they had to drill 2 holes to get some weight out of it so it would spin evenly and the weight would be distributed and these are spinning at hundreds of RPMs.
Right.
So that whole process really had a lot to do with how long the engine would last.
Okay.
And of course Lincoln was famous for making engines that were very well built and designed, and they were quiet, and of course they were also mindful of the fact that they had to live a long time. So
right.
the oiling was a lot better in some of these engines. The balancing had to be better. The quality of the bearings had to be fairly high.
Sure.
In order to withstand this constant rotation thousands, millions of times.
And speaking of oiling,
yes.
Here's the oil pump.
Yes, and here's the high-performance oil pump that we talked about.
Right.
The stock oil pump you can recognize because it has a can over it, and it just doesn't pump quite the same amount of volume. And this is a product of later engines, and we're adapting that to this earlier engine, and it relates to the rest of the engine via this gear, which goes down into the block,
yeah.
and then mates up to another gear, which is turned in concert with the rotating
Yeah, we're going to try
assembly.
to show that, I think, in a minute. Now, this is
Right.
This is the flywheel at the back that has
Right.
the teeth in it for the starter.
Exactly.
To turn it. To
Right.
start
The
things up.
teeth of the starter sits about here, and those teeth sit on here. And when they want to start the engine,
Yep.
The teeth on the starter, which has very, very high torque to spin this engine to get it going.
Right.
In fact, we're going to be using a more modern starter to give it even a better start.
Okay.
But in the case of the older ones, they may mate to these teeth, and they have coinciding teeth on the starter.
Yep.
And when the starter starts, it gets it going, and then of course it sucks gasoline into the engine, and the spark plug fires it and it gets it going.
Right on. Okay, so this isn't attached, so we can
No, it's not.
pull this away.
Okay.
Let's
So
see.
that's our. All right, now
So we
if
can
you
see now where
Right.
the
right now you can see the
cover
gear
plate.
that mates to the camshaft.
right.
All right, that's
was
how
at the end
this
of the
just
cam.
carries the weight of the camshaft out at the hinge of this part of the block.
But it also connects the cam to that oil pump.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's
Okay,
ju-
so let's
take
take that out of there.
We can see the end
Right.
of the camshaft right
Exactly.
there with the gear.
Right.
Right there. Okay, so now that's how that's connected. And just before we take the crankshaft off,
Right.
we'll notice that on the front, the cam is connected to the crankshaft with these large gears here.
Exactly.
And so
You see how
as
it
they
relates
turn-
to it.
Yep, it turns there, so you can see how it all is interconnected.
Right.
All right, now we're going to just take a moment. I'm
Yeah.
going to pause, and we're going to take this crank off together. It's
Okay.
heavy.
One last thing.
Yep.
This is a later cam gear because it's made out of aluminum.
Okay.
The earlier ones were made out of a fiber. It was actually an early form of composite, which
Really?
everybody thinks composites and fiberglass and that sort of thing started much later, but in fact it was around and in common use in a very, very, very long time ago, late 20s, early 30s. So
Okay.
that fiber gear, which wore out prematurely, in this engine will be replaced with an aluminum version of it, which should give it longer life.
I got you. Very good.
Okay?
Okay, so now with the crankshaft removed, we can see the cam.
Right. Now remember that these two guys are related one to the other because the cam is really a device that simply raises and lowers the position of the valve in the head. So again, back to what we were talking about earlier, the cam lobes, these are cam lobes, relate to the valve, and a rod comes up and opens a valve and allows the gas and air mixture to enter the combustion chamber, okay, which is here, all right?
Yep.
And that loads it with gas infused air, and then that valve closes and it fires, the spark plug sets the entire thing off. There's an explosion occurs, and then that spent gas comes out of another valve. So that's how you have exhaust valves and intake valves, okay?
Right. Now we know the intake. We've shown the intake
Right.
before.
Right.
I think we have an exhaust manifold here
Right,
too.
right. Now this is a very unique way of doing this, because remember, this is a V12. Now you'd wonder why there's 4 holes over here. Well, that's because this is feeding 2, this is feeding 2, and this is 1 and 1. So that's how you get your 6 on a side. And this is the exhaust manifold, and this shows you clearly how the exhaust gases are exited. You can notice, for instance, that this is a very smooth casting both inside and out.
Yep.
So the air-fuel mixture is allowed to exit very smoothly. You'll notice in some designs of exhaust manifolds that they're kind of notchy, and that creates a disturbance in the airflow that's passing through this and out and away from the engine. So you want the air coming in smoothly, you want it exiting smoothly. That all has a lot to do with the performance and mileage that the engine is able to produce.
So even back in 1938, 39,
right.
they engineered this very
this is a very
carefully,
sophisticated exhaust manifold.
Yeah.
And you can see that the flash lines here are where the 2 pieces are put together. Ordinarily this would be out of your view, and you wouldn't know that it did anything important, but it's extremely important in terms of performance. These engines would go 90 miles an hour and get 20 miles the gallon. That was unheard of.
Yeah, that's
the car
amazing.
weighed 4,000 pounds. So let's think about that for a minute.
That's right.
Put that in today's vernacular, and you see how really efficient they were.
Yeah. Back to the heads for a
Okay.
moment.
We got here's the intake manifold. This is the stock manifold. We probably will not be using it on this engine, but it gives you a sense of the carburetor's in the middle. Now the fuel has to flow out and down here. This shows you the fallacy of a single small carburetor in the middle, because what happens ultimately is that it's having to go this great distance clear out to here. Well, if you have more carburetors, then you have a more equal distribution of the air fuel mixture, so the engine achieves flow from a much shorter distance than having to go from here clear out to here.
Yeah.
So the efficiencies are actually greater.
Very good.
These heads are aluminum. These heads are cast iron. There's nothing wrong with cast iron heads, but they don't radiate heat as well. And this is a really good set of heads that we're planning to use on the 38 we're building, and these are really excellent condition considering their age, and this head is a really good original, and this is shows you what they look like, and this shows you what it looks like when they've been restored. You can see here that we had some problems. That was welded, and then it was fly cut or level cut completely across the face of it, so that it would go back on the engine and seal properly.
Right on.
Okay.
Very good. All right.
There you go.
Making progress. Here we go.
Yes, we go.